I got karma hard. My hubby found a speeding ticket from my car, captured late at night. Then, one moment you're saying, I do on the happiest day of your life, and the other you're cheating on your husband during the middle of the night. Have you ever seen yourself in this situation? Well, I didn't see myself here, but here I am. Before we get to the crazy part, let me explain how all of this started. My name is Rachel. I am 37 years old and married to Chris. He is 49 years old, and we've been together for 12 years. We have a sort of big age difference, which was pointed out by my family many times when we started dating, but I was in love, so I didn't care. My best friend from work, Anna, introduced me to Chris on her birthday. She said he was very close to her husband, and they always went out with him and other friends. I was going through a very painful breakup at the time, and she pretty much pimped out Chris to me. She said he wasn't worth anything, but could be a good distraction as a rebound. According to the stories, Chris was a guy from a rich family very dedicated to his work, but with no commitment to anyone else. He was used to dating many different women and not getting serious with any of them. Anna said he was well recommended by the ladies, and the perfect guy to have fun and not get attached. She was very dedicated to get me out of my breakup slump, which, according to her, the only way I could do it was by sleeping with someone else. Chris came over to me at the bar, having been clearly sent by Anna. He was funny and incredibly charming. I was 25, and it felt like I was finally talking to an actual man and not a 20-something boy. Also, he reminded me of the professor I had a crush on at college. I didn't have any moral opinions on age differences, but it was my first time doing it. It was definitely fun. That day, we hooked up like teenagers in the bar's bathroom, but when he invited me to his house, I freaked out a little bit. I told him it had been 3 months since my last relationship ended, and as much as I wanted, I didn't feel ready for it. He was very understanding about it and asked me out on a date. Chris said he wanted me to feel comfortable and also get to know me better. When I told this to Anna the next day, she basically laughed at me. She told me I couldn't date Chris because no one dates him and he doesn't date anyone. He was like a 37-year-old boy toy. Her words. I said I was taking the challenge because I actually needed to forget about my dating problems and didn't have any expectations of having anything serious with Chris. We went out together a few weeks later, had a very romantic dinner, and I didn't lose any time. He came to my apartment with me after we ate and drank a lot of wine. That day, I found true happiness. I am completely serious while exposing myself here. He was a pro. I had never met a man so talented like him. It was like he released all my problems away. After hours of the best feeling I'd ever felt, I realized how I had only dated losers. He left in the morning after making me breakfast, and yes, he was an amazing cook. I was shocked. He said he would call me, and I tried to react as naturally as possible, but inside I was desperate to see him again. I called Anna the minute he left. She was so happy I was finally back again, but worried about getting too involved with Chris. I told her to not worry about it. He called me that night, the day after, and all of the next ones. He invited me to go out basically every day. He always had a different place for us to go. Sometimes it felt like he was inventing new places and they randomly showed up just for us. We dated for a few months until he kind of got threatened by my best friend. Our things seemed to be getting serious, and that was unusual in his life. We were out with Anna, her husband, and some other friends. After Anna's questioning, he pulled me aside and said he was having feelings for me he never felt with anyone else. Chris never talked about feelings and things like that, but that day he said he didn't want to be with anyone else ever. Initially, I didn't want anything serious either, but God, he was perfect. I never felt the need to have a party life and hook up with different people every weekend, so I wasn't missing anything by getting serious with Chris. He treated me like a princess, and I loved having him around. I was definitely having feelings for him too. 2 years after we met, he told me he had a surprise. Chris had a friend who owned an art gallery. He got it for the night as a favor. When we got to the gallery, there were only black lights on, a gigantic canvas on the wall, and a lot of different colors of neon paint. At that point, he knew I was obsessed with art and pretty much planned the best date ever. The black lights and the neon colors vibrating in the canvas, in our hands and accidentally in our faces, made the most romantic atmosphere we've ever had. When he stopped for a while to drink more wine, he started saying something I will never forget. "Hey, baby. I brought you here today because there's something I need to tell you and had no idea how. It will definitely ruin the night, but it was great until this moment. I hope you remember it." I started looking at him like he was a crazy person about to commit a huge mistake. I thought I could handle this when we started dating. but turns out I'm not cut out for it. Our lives are pretty much the same now. Everyone thinks I changed and that I'm ready to settle down, but I'm sorry. I'm not really boyfriend material. Sorry. He said, staring at his feet and avoiding my eyes. I started crying, trying to keep it together, but it wasn't going to last long. Please, Rachel, don't cry. You know I'm not good at this boyfriend stuff. That's why I want to be your husband. He finished talking and pulled out a box with an engagement ring on it, as if it was nothing. I couldn't see many details with the black light, but as soon as I understood what it was, I freezed and looked at him like he jump-scared me. When he got on his knees and officially asked me if I wanted to marry him, I cried even more. I don't know how many times I said yes, but it was a lot. With the addition of God, Chris, you almost gave me a heart attack. To which he just answered, I thought you liked guys with a sense of humor. I did, but from that moment on, I liked only one guy with a sense of humor. Everything was perfect. From our wedding to our first 5 years together, no problems seemed to bother us. Initially, my friends were worried about Chris cheating on me. He had a long history with women, and they didn't think he'd be able to get over that. Of course, men always cheat, but I trusted him, and I could see he was too tired to keep up with his old habits. Chris was almost 40. He knew his future wouldn't be good if he cheated on the 27-year-old who agreed to marry him. We had everything to work out. We were obsessed with each other. Honesty was the one thing we didn't break, and we trusted each other in bad and good moments. I didn't know that we peaked around that time, because after that things started to go down the hill. That's literally the best metaphor I could use, and you'll understand why. I remember Chris's 46th birthday party being one of our last great moments together. Until then, things were fine, but in that year, our troubles started. Chris started acting distant. He barely talked to me. I tried to get close and find out what was going on, but he kept pushing me off and saying he didn't want to talk about it. We started having problems in the bedroom. We pretty much never did it, and when we tried, nothing came up. Quite literally, nothing came up. Every time I tried to talk to him about it, he'd get mad and say, I didn't have anything to do with his business. I was his wife for the past 7 years and the only person with access to his business, but of course I didn't have anything to do with it. I started thinking he was cheating on me, and that problem was only a consequence of it. We had crazy fights about it, until he finally opened up saying he wasn't cheating on me, because he wouldn't even have the capacity to. He said he was seeing a doctor to figure out what was going on, but he was too embarrassed to talk to me about it. It was definitely a personal matter, and he asked me to leave him handling it by himself. I finally understood why he was so weird about it, so I gave him the space he needed. I didn't ask about it and pretended nothing was going on. After a few months, he started taking medication to see if it would help. It worked out. We spent a whole week dedicated to do what we had been waiting for during the year. I thought it was finally over. Unfortunately, he started having very hard to ignore side effects. The medication was affecting his heart and blood pressure, so he randomly started passing out and having heart palpitations. It got worse than it already was, so he quit it. He was still seeing his doctor, who I had no idea about, but it seemed like Chris had given up. This whole situation frustrated Chris so much it was a little depressing. I made it clear I was there for him and still loved him no matter what. But he was fighting a war against himself in his head, and it had nothing to do with me. It didn't matter that I didn't care about it. He was feeling his masculinity being affected, and that issue was pretty much ruining his life. Chris never shared with me the reasons which were causing that problem. He said he was getting other treatments, but I had no idea what they were, and as the years went by, he officially gave up. It was over for us, unless there was a miracle coming to fix our sexual life. When I told my family we were engaged, my mother said older guys were fun in our 20s. But after that, they start having old man problems while our good years are being wasted on them. To be honest, I knew it was going to happen, just didn't know it would be so soon. It was frustrating for me too, but I loved Chris and could never divorce him for such a stupid reason. Our relationship had its ups and downs, and we were going through a long down. Things had been hard, but I kept thinking it would get better. While I ignored the need to call time of death on my marriage, I focused on work. Ever since my relationship started sinking, my professional life, on the contrary, came up like a rocket. When I met Chris, I had just finished business school, and now I work for a multinational company which takes me out of the country at least once a month. The best part about being obsessed with work is being able to easily ignore my personal life. The less I saw Chris, the more I could remember how he was in the beginning of our relationship, and that way I could picture him as my husband. When I was home, we would go out to dinner, museums, talk, and everything else. Our connection was hanging through these occasional sweet moments we had. It was sad that they were rare. I thought I could see past his issue, but things changed a lot after he gave up fixing it. I almost didn't think about how sad my life was until I met Ian. One day, my boss called me for a meeting and said it was hard contacting me when I was out of the country. I had to be in meetings, and the time zone difference was always a mess. The solution for that problem was Ian. Ian became my full-time assistant. He handled my communication with the company and all of the other headquarters I sometimes traveled to in other countries. If I was in town, he was in town. If I was traveling, he was traveling with me. Ian is 27 years old and a huge walking reminder of how much I was missing while being married. He was so gorgeous it made me sick. At first I had to control my wandering eye when he was around. He worked out a lot, but the worst part is that he was actually handsome. I realized that when he showed me pictures of him before starting the gym. After a couple of months I was already used to his beauty. I didn't have any more problems interacting with him and talking about our lives, so we became friends. I didn't have the intention of sleeping with Ian. It would be wrong, awkward, cheating on my husband, etc. He was nice to look at, but I had a commitment with my husband. The thought crossed my mind once or twice, but I couldn't do that to Chris. I thought that for 6 months until I gave in to what I was feeling. I traveled for work, and as usual, Ian was with me. The company always paid the hotels, which we pretty much never leave if not for meetings. Not being able to enjoy the places we visit is a little boring. Our rooms were next to each other, and we were both alone waiting for the night to end, because there would be a meeting at 7 in the morning, so there wasn't much to do. I was almost going to sleep when Ian knocked on my door. He said he was bored and wanted to talk. I let him in, already feeling I would probably do something bad. That day, Ian was somehow determined to make it happen. He kissed me a few minutes after getting there and checked if I wouldn't yell at him. I didn't. I slept with my assistant. I cheated on my husband. I never doubted this could happen, not after all that happened with Chris, but I always wanted to avoid it. I always told myself that the moment Chris annoyed me too much, I would divorce him, not cheat on him. It happened either way, and it was good. Amazing, actually. It had been years since my last time, and I didn't feel an ounce of regret doing it. Not even later. I felt bad only when I saw Chris. I felt bad for lying to him, but I didn't care. And thinking back now, I see I should have cared. I loved Chris so much for so many years. It's sad seeing what happened to us.
I know that.
I even thought that maybe if we had a kid, it would be easier to forget about our main problem. There would be different priorities, and at least something for the two of us to dedicate together. But I wasn't good with kids. Chris was worse than me, and it would be hard for us to try to have a kid given our conditions. Divorce was our best option, but I felt bad about leaving Chris. It was like if I did, I'd be abandoning him for a superficial reason. I guess it would be better than lying to him and cheating. Reflecting now, I see I kind of deserved what I had coming. It was a very stupid decision. Ian and I kept our affair going for more than a year. At first, we were extremely careful about hiding everything, but as soon as I realized Chris cared more about his work than his marriage, just like me, I just let go. Initially, we only slept together on trips. Then we started seeing each other in our city when I had a day off or when Chris was out of town. With time, we had a few loose ends, but nothing Chris could notice. On Ian's birthday, I sneaked out of home close to 2 in the morning. One thing I learned about my husband is that he can't fall asleep without sleeping pills, so even if I broke the entire house with a hammer, he wouldn't wake up. That would have been very useful for my affair, if only we hadn't gotten caught before. That night, I left with my car almost to the other side of town. I didn't want Ian to drive me around or be seen with him, so I returned by myself. I got a speeding ticket that day around 4 a.m., but I didn't even notice it. I only came face to face with it when they delivered it in our mail. One day, I got home from work and Chris questioned me about it. The name of the street and hour of the ticket were written in it. I thought about lying about having to buy medicine or something, but it was in a pretty faraway street, in a day I wasn't traveling. I was trapped and there was no excuse. He asked me and I remained in silence. He asked me again until he realized something was wrong. He kept staring at me quiet, and I just let go an almost unhearable, "I'm sorry." He sighed, seeming frustrated and exhausted at the same time. "Oh my God, Monica, I can't believe you," he said. "I love you, Chris. I'm sorry for doing this to you." I wasn't going to try to justify myself, I screwed up, and from what I knew Chris, he'd be mad. He didn't really care about his marriage, but he sure as hell cared about cheating. I'm leaving, right now. Who the hell was it with? I could see him struggling with the part of him who wanted to know about the affair and the other who thought the least was better. When I said I was with my assistant, he clearly had to control himself not to break anything. I'm taking away everything I own. My lawyers will be here this week. Listen to me, Monica. You won't even see or smell my money. I'm giving you absolutely nothing. I didn't know I married a slut. He started walking away to our bedroom. I started crying and calling his name. He just turned to me and said, "What?" Literally, what the hell do you have to say to me now? I stopped, breathed, answered, "You are right. I'm sorry," and watched him walk away after picking up most of his things. I didn't really regret the way things ended, so I definitely deserved the way he was treating me. It was past the time we parted our ways. The next day, I left for work trying to hide being upset. I asked Ian to not talk to me for a few days, and he respected it. I felt terrible, and definitely didn't want to talk to anyone about it. At night, when I got home, I got the karma which was waiting for me since I started this whole thing. The apartment was completely destroyed. The furniture was ripped off, broken, and wrecked. Our mattress and pillows were flying around and ripped in pieces. All of our plates, cups, and everything else made of glass were broken. All of the clothes I owned had very big and clear scissors cuts. He didn't miss a single one of them. On the dinner table was a post-it signed by Chris. It was written, "Doing this was very fun. Have a good life, Monica. From your husband." I couldn't even react. I was shocked and numb. That was something I for sure didn't expect from Chris. He wasn't really someone to express his feelings, but looking around, I could see very big and angry expressions of feelings. And that's how my beautiful love story comes to an end, having my apartment looking like a rock star's hotel room after a party. I had it coming, there was no doubt about it. I'm still processing our separation and haven't gotten to a conclusion yet. The only thing I know is that I screwed up big time. Update. Hello again, Reddit. A couple of months ago, I made this post telling the story of my failed marriage and husband who found out about my affair through a speeding ticket. The one who trashed my apartment and all. Remember? Well, how can I begin? Something very obvious. Chris hates me a lot. I always saw him as the kind of guy who leaves without saying a word and acts super mysterious about it, but that's definitely the opposite. I hurted him more than I thought I did. He keeps sending letters to my address saying how much he hates me and very detailed descriptions of all the ways he pictured me dying. No! He said in the letters I shouldn't take them as death threats. According to his words, he hated me a lot, but considered exaggerated and deranged to kill me for an affair. He was always a very ethical man and against domestic violence, so I knew he wouldn't try to hurt me. He is struggling to get over our divorce, and while he is at it, he decided to bother me with it. It is not a bad idea for a cheating revenge, in case anyone is in need of ideas of what to do to your cheating spouse. I hope Chris can eventually come to terms with it, for his own sake.
And then
what I take from all this is that I should have told him about it, or at least asked for a divorce. Unfortunately, I can't change the past, and I regret doing this in a way that hurted him 100 times more than it had to. Chris is a good man and he didn't deserve going through this. For all reading this, I hope you can be more mature than I was. Marriages are hard, and sometimes you do have to end them, but unlike me, you should end it with dignity for you and your spouse, with respect for everything you have been through together. Divorces are always hard, but when there's cheating involved, things get worse. It's like a bloodbath with the arguing and fighting over cars, houses, bank accounts, and the wish that the other part doesn't get anything. That way it feels like it's even for what they put you through. That was also Chris's philosophy. Our divorce was hell, but now it's finally over. My final message for you is, please think before getting married, or at least don't cheat on your spouses.